If you want to hear about the most ridiculous day of my entire culinary career, you better order something first. The house special today is Centaurian Shadow Beast, aged to perfection I say, adjusting my fourth arm's thermal sleeve while polishing a quantum glass wine decanter. No? Just water? Fine. But don't blame me if your taste buds file a complaint for neglect. I'm Zach Zoll, head chef at Galaxy's Finest Cuts, and yes, that's actually the name. Trust me, I've tried to change it 16 times, but apparently some marketing genius decided that simple and direct was the way to go. Located in the prestigious Ring 7 of Starbase Nexus, we're the go-to establishment for every sophisticated being with more credits than sense and an appetite for the extraordinary. You wouldn't believe the clientele we get here, I continue, my secondary eyes rolling independently of my primary ones. Just yesterday, I served a Plutonian silkworm that insisted its meal should be presented in zero gravity. Do you have any idea how challenging it is to keep sauce spheres perfectly aligned in a suspended state? But that's what you deal with when you're the only restaurant in the quadrant specializing in raw species culinary experiences. The bar counter beneath my lower arms hums with the subtle vibration of the station's artificial gravity generators. Through the panoramic windows, the endless expanse of space stretches out, occasionally interrupted by the sleek silhouettes of passing luxury cruisers, each one potentially carrying another demanding customer with impossibly specific dietary requirements. See that table over there? I gesture with my third arm toward a shimmering force field booth. That's where Ambassador Nixis holds her weekly dinner meetings. Always orders our rarest cuts of Jovian Thunder Ox, but insists they be prepared at exactly 372.8 degrees Kelvin. Not 372.7, not 372.9. She claims she can taste the difference. Spoiler alert, she can't. My tentacle-like sensory appendages detect the approach of another regular before I even see him. Ah, here comes Mr. Blixnack. 3 hearts, each requiring a different cooking temperature. Makes ordering a simple meal into a trigonometry problem. I take a moment to adjust the atmospheric settings in his usual booth. The methane-rich mixture he prefers would knock out half our oxygen-breathing customers, but that's just another day at Galaxy's Finest Cuts. We cater to everything from silicon-based life forms to beings that exist primarily in the 4th dimension. Our secret? Well, it's not really a secret when it's plastered all over our advertising hollows, but we source our ingredients from over 3,000 planets. Each meat, vegetable, or whatever you want to call some of these things, is carefully selected and prepared according to both traditional and innovative methods. Sometimes we even have to invent new methods just to handle the more unusual requests. The quantum timer on my chef's uniform beeps, reminding me that the Neptunian sea serpent filets need rotating in their temporal marinade. You see that kitchen back there? State-of-the-art everything. Quantum grills that can cook food in multiple timelines simultaneously, molecular restructuring ovens, and even a small contained black hole for our more exotic preparations. Cost more than some small moons. But when you're serving the galaxy's elite, you spare no expense. My attention is momentarily drawn to the restaurant's entrance as the environmental shields shimmer, adjusting to accommodate a new arrival. Oh, speaking of expense, you should see our wine cellar. We have vintages that haven't even been made yet. Time Loop Sommelier's special, very exclusive. Had to get special permits from the temporal authorities for that one. I pause, all 4 of my arms freezing mid-motion as I notice something unusual about the figure who just walked in. Now that's not something you see every day, is that? A human? In my restaurant? This should be interesting. Excuse me while I alert the staff. Something tells me we're in for quite an evening. As I move toward the kitchen, I can't help but wonder what sort of culinary adventure this human customer will demand. Little did I know, I was about to experience the most memorable service of my career, and not in any way I could have predicted. The human strides in with that peculiar 2-legged gait they're known for, wearing what appears to be some sort of protective outer shell in black. Welcome to Galaxy's Finest Cuts, I announce, trying to modulate my voice for human audio perception ranges. I'm Zach Zoll, your chef and culinary guide for the evening. Jack Morrison, he responds, extending one of his upper appendages. I've studied enough xenobiology to know this is their traditional greeting ritual. though I still find it bizarre. I carefully extend my least intimidating arm to complete the ceremony. Heard this was the best place for a good steak in the quadrant. Ah yes, we pride ourselves on our selection of premium cuts from across the galaxy. Please, allow me to show you to our temperature-controlled seating area. I guide him to a booth designed for oxygen breathers, carefully adjusting the gravitational settings to Earth standard. Though I must admit, you're our first human patron. What brings you to this sector? Business, he says, settling into the booth with that strange bent posture humans prefer. Terraforming consultant. Been stuck in meetings with silicon-based life forms all week. Really craving something familiar, you know. I activate the holographic menu, watching with amusement as he waves his hands through it several times before realizing he needs to tap the icons. Our specialties include Martian sandcrawler tenderloin, European ice fisher fillets, and just a rare steak, he interrupts, looking somewhat overwhelmed by the rotating 3D displays of various exotic dishes. The rarest you've got. Been living on synthetic protein for months. My primary stomach churns anxiously. Rare? As in? Difficult to acquire, I ask, my sensory tentacles twitching with uncertainty. No, he laughs, making that strange barking sound humans produce when amused. Rare as in barely cooked. You know, red in the middle, still bleeding a little. My forearms freeze mid-gesture. Still bleeding? By the cosmic void, these humans are more primitive than I thought. You consume flesh while it still contains bodily fluids. I try to keep my secondary eyes from bulging too noticeably. Yeah, that's right. Medium rare would be fine too, but I prefer it rare. And please, no synth meat. I can always tell the difference. He taps the table absently with his eating utensils, another bizarre human habit I'll never understand. I signal discreetly to Mira, our head server, using my upper left arm's phosphorescent patches. Of course, sir. And what species of flesh would you prefer for this? Rare preparation. Surprise me, he grins, showing those unsettling white calcium deposits humans call teeth. Something as close to beef as you can get. Nothing tentacled though, if you don't mind. My neural clusters fire rapidly as I try to process this request. Raw flesh, still containing biological fluids, from a non-tentacled species, prepared in a way that maintains its natural state while still being considered cooked. Very well, sir. Would you care for any appetizers while we prepare your special order? I'm already composing an urgent message to our xenobiological safety consultant in my head. Just a glass of red wine. Something that pairs well with red meat. He hands back the holographic menu, which flickers slightly as it passes through his fingers. Certainly. I'll have our temporally certified sommelier select something appropriate. I back away from the table, all forearms making what I hope are reassuring gestures. Please excuse me while I consult with our preparation team about your unique request. As I hurry toward the kitchen, my mind races with questions. How do we prepare a dish that's simultaneously cooked and raw? What kind of creature would satisfy this human's craving for beef without violating any intergalactic health codes? And most importantly, what sort of being actually prefers their food still containing active biological compounds? Little did I know, these questions were about to become the least of my concerns. The real chaos was just beginning to unfold in my supposedly well-ordered kitchen. Emergency staff meeting, I announce, bursting through the quantum-sealed kitchen doors. My kitchen crew, representing 12 different species and twice as many appendage configurations, turns to face me. We have a situation. Did the Plutonian silkworm return? Asks Blurk, our sous chef, his crystalline exoskeleton clicking nervously. Worse. We have our first human customer. The words send a ripple of nervous energy through the kitchen. And he wants his food rare. Rare. Blurk's translation matrix struggles with the word. Like the extinct Venusian thunder lizard rare. No, I wave all forearms in frustration. Rare as in barely cooked, still containing biological fluids. Still, fresh. The last word causes several staff members to change color involuntarily. That's when our newest hire, Lyra, pipes up from the prep station. She's fresh from the Andromeda Galaxy's finest culinary academy, all shimmering scales and eager enthusiasm. Oh, I know about humans. We studied them in Xenogastronomy 101. They're endothermic omnivores with a preference for cooked proteins, right? Apparently not cooked enough, I mutter, checking the restaurant's database for anything resembling earth beef. He specifically requested something, and I quote, "still bleeding." The kitchen falls silent except for the gentle hum of the quantum grills. Then Lyra's eyes brighten with that dangerous gleam that only the young and inexperienced can muster. Wait, remember that trader who came through last week? The one selling those biostasis pods. My stomach sinks. The ones containing the escaped specimens from that failed colonization attempt. Yes, they're technically fresh, right? And they're from a bipedal species, so the meat structure should be similar to what humans are used to. Lyra practically bounces with excitement, her scales reflecting rainbow patterns across the kitchen walls. Absolutely not, I declare, but I can see the idea taking root among my staff. We can't serve sentient species to other sentient species. There are laws. But according to the manifest, Blurk interjects, pulling up the holographic inventory, they're classified as livestock. See? Right here under species designation, cultivation grade biological assets. I peer at the flickering text. He's right. Technically, according to the paperwork, these weren't classified as sentient beings but as organic resources. A bureaucratic oversight, surely, but the human did say to surprise him, Lyra adds helpfully, and they are preserved in perfect condition. The freshest meat possible. Fresh isn't the issue here, I protest, but I'm losing control of the situation. The kitchen staff has that look, the one that says they've convinced themselves this is a perfectly reasonable solution. Think about it, continues Lyra, her enthusiasm infectious among the junior staff. Humans consume flesh that's still red inside. These specimens are perfectly preserved, technically organic, and already portioned to standard serving sizes. Plus, they're classified as food products in our system. This is a terrible idea, I groan, but my resolve is weakening. The human had been very specific about wanting real meat, not synthetic proteins, and our reputation for providing exotic dining experiences was at stake. I'll prepare the biostasis chamber, Blurk announces before I can protest further. Lyra, you handle the presentation. Remember, humans appreciate visual aesthetics in their food. Wait, I call out, but they're already in motion. Lyra practically glides to the storage area, her scales shimmering with excitement. The rest of the kitchen staff disperses to their stations, already planning complimentary side dishes and garnishes. We should at least check the xenobiological compatibility charts, I suggest weakly, but no one's listening anymore. Lyra returns, triumphantly carrying a biostasis pod that glows with a soft blue light. Look how perfect this is, she exclaims, adjusting the stasis field. The specimen is exactly the right size for a main course. And see, the cellular structure is remarkably similar to other livestock species. I watch in horrified fascination as my well-trained staff begins preparing what could very well be the biggest mistake of our culinary careers. Blurk calibrates the quantum grill to maintain partial biological functions while technically cooking the outer layers. Lyra arranges garnishes with artistic flair, her scales now pulsing with creative enthusiasm. The wine pairing has been selected, announces our sommelier, floating in on his anti-gravity platform. A lovely vintage from the Orion Nebula, notes of stardust and cosmic radiation, pairs perfectly with whatever this is. This is going to end badly, I mutter, watching as Lyra places the final touches on the plate. Despite my reservations, I have to admit she's made it look impressive. The presentation is immaculate, the garnish is perfectly placed, the accompanying sauces arranged in artistic swirls. Service ready, Lyra announces proudly, lifting the dome over the completed dish. Should I take it out? No, I practically shout, all four arms reaching for the plate. I'll do it. If something goes wrong, I want to be the one responsible, at least that way. I reason I'll maintain some control over the inevitable disaster. As I prepare to leave the kitchen, Lyra calls out helpfully, remember to tell him it's served at optimal freshness levels. Humans appreciate that kind of detail. What have we done? I whisper to myself, carefully balancing the covered plate. Through the kitchen windows, I can see Jack Morrison waiting expectantly at his table, sipping his temporarily aged wine. This was either going to be the pinnacle of cross-cultural culinary innovation or the biggest disaster since the great Centaurian SCIFI collapse of 2157. Somehow, I suspect I know which way it's going to go. "Your special order, sir," I announce, approaching Jack's table with all the confidence of someone walking into an airlock without a spacesuit. "Prepared to your exact specifications, rare, as requested, with a, shall we say, unique presentation." Jack Morrison straightens in his seat, placing his wine glass down. "Smells interesting. What kind of meat is it?" Well, I adjust the plate with my lower arms while my upper ones fidget nervously. "Let's maintain an element of surprise, shall we? Our chef has selected something very fresh. Exceptionally fresh, one might say." With a flourish that I immediately regret, I lift the dome. The quantum-stabilized garnishes shimmer in the restaurant's ambient lighting, arranged artistically around the main course. The meat, carefully seared on the outside, while maintaining that requested rareness within, sits in the center of the plate. That's when the biostasis field flickers. You see, there's a reason most restaurants don't serve meat in quantum suspension. The slightest disruption in the field can have unexpected results. In this case, the result is our main course beginning to regain consciousness. Jack's eyes widen to what I assume must be an uncomfortable degree for human optical organs. Did that just move? A simple neural response, I try to explain, watching in horror as the partially cooked specimen twitches. Purely reflexive, I assure you. A sign of optimal freshness. Then it blinks. Now, I've seen many reactions to our exotic dishes over the years. The Arcturian ambassador who changed colors and melted their chair. The Neptunian duke who sprouted additional tentacles in shock. But nothing prepared me for a human male screaming at a pitch that could interfere with our quantum communication systems. It's alive. Jack leaps from his seat, knocking over his wine glass. The vintage nebula red creates an artistic splash pattern across his protective outer layer. That's a person. A blue person. Technically, I start to explain, backing away as both the human and our main course become increasingly animated. According to our inventory classification system, it's listed as premium-grade biological. I don't finish the sentence because our perfectly prepared steak chooses that moment to roll off the plate, landing with surprising grace considering it's partially seared on one side. The restaurant erupts into chaos. Our Plutonian silkworm customer, startled by the commotion, releases defensive spores that turn the entire north section of the dining room into a crystalline garden. Ambassador Nixus, attempting to maintain dignity, accidentally activates her species' fight-or-flight response, causing her to molt explosively all over her weekly dinner guests. Security breach in Sector 7G, the station's AI announces with inappropriate cheerfulness. Unregistered biological entity detected. Containment protocols initiated. Atmospheric containment fields snap into place, trapping everyone inside. Which might have been helpful if our partially cooked escapee hadn't managed to slip through the force field condensers. Turns out quantum grilled tissue has some interesting properties when it comes to energy barriers. "Stop that meat," I shout, then immediately regret my choice of words as Jack Morrison turns an alarming shade of pale. Lyra bursts from the kitchen, her scales now flashing emergency patterns. I can explain. The manifest clearly stated these were cultivation-grade assets. We followed all proper food preparation protocols. Those were colonists. Jack's voice has reached a frequency that's causing our quantum wine cellar to vibrate dangerously. They were in stasis for terraforming projects, not food. Oh, Lyra's scales dim to a mortified gray. That would explain the environmental modification tools we thought were garnishes. That's when the station's security forces arrive, led by none other than Senior Health Inspector Biaxoff themselves. All 7 of their eyes focus on the scene before them, our dining room transformed into a crystalline garden, a partially cooked blue humanoid trying to access the environmental controls, and me, standing in the middle of it all, with an empty plate and forearms raised in surrender. Zax ul Biaxoth rumbles, their enforcement tentacles already reaching for their citation pad. "Would you care to explain why my scanners are detecting unauthorized sentient biomatter being served as cuisine? Along with 17 other health code violations I'm registering within my first glance." Would you believe I begin watching as our escaped main course manages to override the atmospheric controls, that this is all a simple cultural misunderstanding about the human definition of rare meat. The sprinkler system chooses that moment to activate, but instead of fire suppressant, it's somehow dispensing the morning's batch of marinating sauce. The combination of liquid and the plutonian crystal spores creates an instant reaction, coating every surface with a shimmering, highly adhesive glaze. Make that 24 violations BXO updates their citation count, somehow managing to avoid the impromptu sauce rain, including illegal temporal manipulation of condiments. As security drones swarm in through the ventilation system, I notice Jack Morrison has found his way to the bar and is drinking directly from a bottle of our finest Martian whiskey. I can't really blame him. The last time I saw someone try to serve sentient beings as dinner was, well, never. This is definitely a first for Galaxy's finest cuts. The good news I announced to no one in particular as chaos continues to unfold around us is that technically we did fulfill the customer's request for rare meat. The bad news is, well, everything else. 5 hours later, I find myself sitting in the station's administrative office, all four arms cuffed to a chair designed for beings with considerably fewer appendages. Jack Morrison sits across from me, now wearing a station-issued clean outfit after his was permanently fused with marinating sauce. Between us, Health Inspector BXO floats menacingly in their official hover pod. So let me summarize BXO drones, their citation pad now thick enough to qualify as a lethal weapon. You attempted to serve a sentient being as dinner because of a linguistic misunderstanding about the word rare. To be fair, I point out, our inventory system clearly labeled them as agricultural assets. Because they were meant to cultivate new colonies, Jack throws his hands up. They're terraforming experts. The blue skin is adapted for high UV environments. That explains why they paired so well with our solar-aged wine. Lyra mutters from her corner. Her scales have been stuck in a pattern of embarrassed purple for the last 3 hours. BXO's enforcement tentacles twitch. And the escaped entree. Safely defrosted and currently giving a fascinating lecture about atmospheric modification to the station's engineering team. Jack sighs. They're actually quite forgiving about the whole thing. Apparently being partially quantum grilled gave them some interesting insights into molecular reconstruction. See? Silver lining, I try to gesture optimistically, but the handcuffs limit my movement. No lasting harm done, and we've all learned valuable lessons about cross-cultural communication. That's when something unexpected happens. Jack Morrison starts laughing. Not the hysterical laughter of someone who's just witnessed an attempted accidental cannibalism, but genuine amusement. You know what's really funny? He manages between chuckles. This isn't even the strangest thing that's happened to me this week in space. Yesterday, a Venusian tried to marry me because I sneezed in their direction. Apparently that's a proposal in their culture. BXO's hover pod descends slightly. You find this situation amusing, Mr. Morrison? Actually, yes. Jack wipes his eyes. Look, where I come from, there's an old saying, the best stories start with massive misunderstandings. And you have to admit, this is one hell of a story. A story that violated 28 health codes. BXO reminds him. True, but it's also a perfect example of why we need better cultural exchange programs. Jack leans forward. Listen, I have a proposal. 2 hours and several pots of synthesized coffee later, we're all gathered back in the partially crystallized remains of my restaurant. The blue-skinned almost dinner is there too, now wearing a borrowed chef's coat and looking surprisingly interested in our kitchen setup. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all molecular configurations, Jack announces to the assembled crowd of staff, officials, and curious onlookers. Welcome to the first official meeting of the Interstellar Culinary Cultural Exchange Program. We're still under citation, BXO points out, but I notice their enforcement tentacles have relaxed slightly. Which is why this is perfect timing for a complete overhaul. Jack continues. Think about it. Every major advancement in history has come from learning from our mistakes. And boy, did we make some spectacular ones today. To my surprise, the blue-skinned former main course, who introduces themselves as Professor Azula, steps forward. I agree. The quantum grilling technique, while unconventional in its application today, has fascinating potential for molecular gastronomy. Perhaps not on sentient beings, though. Exactly, Jack grins. What we have here is an opportunity. A chance to create something unique. A restaurant that doesn't just serve exotic foods, but helps different species understand each other through cuisine. And how exactly do we do that without violating health codes, I ask, but I'm starting to feel a spark of excitement. By doing it right, Jack pulls out his datapad. I've already contacted the Terraforming Council. They're willing to provide funding for a cultural exchange program centered around your restaurant. Real chefs from different worlds teaching each other about their cuisines. That actually sounds interesting, Lyra admits, her scales shifting to a hopeful shade of gold. Plus, Jack adds with a wink, imagine the marketing potential. The restaurant that turned a near-diplomatic incident into an interstellar culinary school? You can't buy that kind of publicity. He's right. News of our disastrous dinner service has already spread across 3 sectors. My communication panel hasn't stopped buzzing with interview requests. There will need to be extensive oversight, BXOth warns, but I can tell they're intrigued. And a complete revision of all classification protocols. Of course, I agree quickly. No more surprises. From now on, we verify everything. Triple-check all translations. And absolutely no serving of sentient beings, no matter how rare someone wants their meat. Speaking of which, Jack turns to me with a mischievous grin. Want to know what I actually meant by rare steak? The next few weeks pass in a blur of activity. Our restaurant undergoes a complete renovation, replacing the crystallized sections with new dining areas designed for cultural exchange. Professor Azula becomes our resident molecular gastronomy expert, their experience with being partially quantum grilled giving them unique insights into food preparation. We launch a new menu that features authentic dishes from various worlds, each with detailed cultural annotations to prevent any more misunderstandings. The Interstellar Health Department even creates a new certification specifically for cross-cultural dining establishments, with Galaxy's Finest Cuts as their pilot program. Lyra turns out to be an excellent cultural liaison, her enthusiasm now properly channeled into actually studying other species' customs before trying to cook them. Her scales have settled into a confident rainbow pattern that only occasionally flashes emergency colors when someone orders something extra rare. 1 year later. And that, young culinary students, is why Galaxy's Finest Cuts became the first restaurant to require a xenoanthropologist on staff, I conclude, adjusting my new ceremonial chef's sash. The graduating class of the Interstellar Culinary Institute's Cultural Exchange Program watches attentively, their various sensory organs fixed on me. Hard to believe it all started with a misunderstanding about steak, Jack says from his usual spot at the bar. He's become a regular, though these days he's more likely to be giving lectures about human cuisine than ordering it. By the way, the New Earth-style grill is arriving next week. Real flames and everything. Flames? In my kitchen, I shudder dramatically with all 4 arms. What's next? Actually burning food on purpose. That's called caramelization, he grins. Trust me, your customers will love it. And they do. Our new fusion menu has made us more popular than ever. Turns out nearly getting arrested for accidentally serving sentient beings as dinner makes for excellent publicity. We're booked solid 6 months in advance, with a waiting list that spans 3 galaxies. The Intergalactic Restaurant Association even created a new category of awards just for us most innovative cross-cultural dining experience, though I suspect that was partly to avoid having to classify what exactly happened during the infamous rare steak incident. Professor Azula runs our research and development kitchen now, combining their terraforming expertise with cooking in ways that continually surprise us. Last week they created a dessert that temporarily transforms your taste buds to experience flavors from different dimensions. The health department is still trying to figure out how to regulate that one. You know what's really ironic, Lyra mentions as she updates our species compatibility database. After all that chaos, we never did serve Jack an actual rare steak. Speaking of which, Jack calls out, I heard the new Martian cattle are finally ready for export. Real Earth-style beef, raised on Mars. Want to be the first restaurant to serve authentic solar system steaks. Absolutely not, I declare firmly. The last time we tried to be first at something. Oh, come on, he laughs. What's the worst that could happen? That's when our quantum alerts start blaring. The new shipment of Martian cattle has apparently broken free from their containment field, and according to the panicked reports coming in, they're somehow able to walk on the station's exterior hull. Quantum-enhanced super cows, I sigh, watching through the viewport as a herd of glowing bovines floats past. Why am I not surprised? Look on the bright side, Jack grins, raising his glass of temporal wine. At least they're not sentient. Probably. Probably my sensory tentacles twitch nervously. Well, the terraforming process did involve some genetic modifications, he trails off as one of the cows turns to look directly at us through the viewport. Is it just me, or did it wink? Alert all stations, the familiar voice of Health Inspector BXOF crackles over the comm system. We have a Code 7 Beta unauthorized evolution of food products. I pour myself a large glass of Neptunian brandy. Jack. Yes, Zaxol. Next time I say we should try something new on the menu. Just stick to the approved cultural exchange recipes. Exactly. As security drones chase glowing, possibly super intelligent cows across the station's hull, I can't help but laugh. In the end, I suppose that's what makes Galaxy's finest cut special. We may not always get it right, but we certainly make the universe a more interesting place to dine. Just remember to always check if your food is sentient before trying to serve it. And maybe think twice about ordering anything rare. You never know what might end up on your plate. Or, in our case, giving lectures about atmospheric terraform while wearing a borrowed chef's coat. End note: the Intergalactic Health Department would like to remind all dining establishments that quantum-enhanced livestock must be certified non-sentient by at least 3 different species before being approved for menu inclusion. No exceptions. Even if they do make excellent dinner conversation.